The Young and the Restless spoilers. The whispers echoing around Genoa City have grown stronger in recent weeks, whispers that the beloved Traci Abbott is finally preparing to return home after a surprisingly long absence, just as Jabot faces some of its most serious internal challenges in years. And for longtime viewers of The Young and the Restless, the idea of Traci stepping back into the Abbott mansion during a moment of upheaval is both comforting and emotionally charged, because Traci has always been the beating heart of her family, the bridge between fractured siblings, the voice of compassion when business wars consume Jack, Kyle, and Ashley. But whenever Traci reappears in Genoa City, her personal life follows her like a warm shadow. Her romantic history, her heartbreaks, the quiet longing she never quite let go of. And this time, that shadow takes the shape of Matt, a man from her past, a man whose presence evokes memories she thought she had buried beneath years of grace, maturity, and emotional growth. The moment word spreads that Matt is also back in town, the emotional temperature of Traci's storyline skyrockets. Not because she is naive, or because she is still the vulnerable young woman she once was, but because Traci Abbott has always possessed a depth of heart unmatched by the rest of her family. Her ability to love deeply, to forgive generously, to remember fiercely, it makes her a force of empathy in a world dominated by ambition, ego, and power. And once upon a time, Matt was part of that softness. Their past, though brief, was meaningful. He came into her life during a period when she desperately needed to feel seen, not as the overlooked Abbott sister, not as the nice one, not as the peacekeeper, but as a woman capable of inspiring tenderness and desire. Matt provided that. He saw the real Traci. And even though circumstances pulled them apart, the emotional imprint remained. Now, years later, when Traci steps into the Abbott living room and unexpectedly encounters Matt standing there. Older, steadier, shaped by experiences neither of them could have predicted, everything she thought she had neatly tucked away crashes over her in a single, overwhelming wave. The moment is cinematic. Traci freezes, her breath catching in her chest as if the past has materialized in front of her without warning. Matt, equally stunned, stares at her with a mixture of nostalgia and conflict, because while the sight of her reawakens the gentleness he once felt, life has changed him too. And then it happens as Traci, who always carries herself with dignity and quiet poise, breaks. The composure cracks. Tears spill. The years of loneliness, the longing she never admitted, the unresolved ache of wondering why their paths had diverged so sharply, all of it erupts. She cries out his name, her voice trembling with disbelief and longing, and then she runs to him, embracing him with a frantic, desperate affection that surprises even herself. "Where have you been all these years?" She cries, her words muffled against his shoulder. It is not an accusation, it is a wound finally speaking. It is the raw truth of a heart that invested deeply, only to watch life pull that love away without closure. Matt holds her, his arms instinctively wrapping around her as if time has rewound, but his expression is complicated. Because in the years since he last saw Traci, he has changed more than she realizes. He has matured, found new passions, new responsibilities, and most importantly, he has found love again. And that love has a name, Sienna Bacall. This revelation becomes the emotional earthquake at the center of Traci's return. Matt is no longer the man who once looked at her with overflowing tenderness. He still cares, he always will, but he has built a new life. And Sienna, with her fire, her tragedy, and her electric presence, has become the center of his emotional world. Sienna brings out a different side of Matt, protective yet challenged, inspired yet grounded. Where Traci offers warmth and stability, Sienna offers passion and unpredictability. They are different women, representing different chapters of Matt's emotional journey. And now Traci must confront the painful truth: the man she once loved has moved on. Emotionally, romantically, spiritually, Matt is no longer hers. Yet the complex nature of love means that Matt is not immune to seeing Traci again. Her embrace, her tears, the sound of her voice cracking as old emotions escape. It awakens something in him, a tenderness he thought time had eroded. For a brief moment, Matt is torn between who he was and who he has become. Between unfinished chapters and new beginnings. Between past comfort and present passion. But ultimately, he gently pulls away from Traci, his voice soft but firm as he explains that life has carried him in a direction he never expected, toward Sienna. The world seems to stop around Traci as she absorbs this truth. Pain flickers across her face, but just as quickly, she masks it with grace. This is who Traci Abbott is, a woman who has learned to lose with dignity, to love without demanding possession, to accept heartache without letting it poison her. Still, the emotional impact is enormous. Her tears do not stop simply because Matt has spoken. Her heart does not unbreak simply because she understands. She stands there, trembling, trying to reconcile the collision of past affection and present reality. And while Matt's loyalty now belongs to Sienna, he cannot deny the emotional disturbance Traci's return has brought into his life. He finds himself questioning whether he ever truly moved on, or whether he simply tried to fill a void left behind by a love story that never had the chance to grow. Meanwhile, Sienna senses something shifting. She may be confident, bold, and emotionally brave, but she is not blind. When Matt speaks about Traci, something changes in his tone. A softness she has never heard before. And for the first time, she wonders if she is fighting a ghost she cannot defeat. Because how do you compete with history? With old love? With first heartbreak? With the quiet tenderness of a woman like Traci, whose emotional presence lingers long after she leaves a room. This is where the storyline becomes electric. Traci and Sienna represent two different paths for Matt. One is a past he never fully resolved. The other is a present he wants to protect. And both paths collide the moment Traci steps back into his life. Genoa City is about to watch a love triangle form, not rooted in jealousy or manipulation, but in something far more devastating, unresolved tenderness. Traci must now decide whether to fight for a love she thought she had lost, or whether to step back and protect the fragile sense of peace she has built for herself. Matt must decide whether his future lies with the fiery woman who challenges him daily, or with the gentle heart who once held him quietly in her soul. And Sienna must confront whether her love is strong enough to withstand the shadow of the woman Matt once cared deeply for. One thing is certain, Traci's return to Genoa City is not just about business at Jabot. It's about reopening the emotional chapter she never knew still existed. It's about confronting the man who once held her heart. And it's about deciding whether the love she buried years ago deserves a second chance, or whether she must let Matt walk toward someone new, even if it breaks her all over again. The days following Traci Abbott's emotional reunion with Matt unfolded like a quiet storm across Genoa City, a storm without thunder or lightning, but one whose pressure altered the air in every room she entered. Traci, who had always moved with a kind of gentle grace that soothed those around her, now carried a tension beneath her calm exterior, a tension that only the wisest eyes could detect. Jack saw it in the way she lingered too long at the window. Ashley saw it in the pauses between her words. Kyle noticed it in the way she smiled, but not quite fully. Word of Matt's return had spread across the Abbott household quickly. But the news of Traci collapsing into his arms with tears streaming down her cheeks, of her emotional outburst, something almost unheard of in her adult life, remained guarded behind the walls of her heart. She had told no one. Not even Jack, the sibling closest to her. Because admitting it out loud meant acknowledging a truth even she wasn't ready to face. That love, no matter how carefully buried, has the ability to resurrect itself the moment the person you never forgot stands before you again. And now, as if fate itself were twisting the knife, Traci found herself crossing paths with Sienna Bacall, the woman who now held Matt's heart, with a frequency that felt almost cruel. Sienna entered Genoa City like a gust of wind from a world Traci no longer recognized, bold, magnetic, unapologetically modern. She dressed like she had stepped out of a glossy magazine, moved with the confidence of someone who had fought her way through life without depending on anyone, and carried a fierce spark that contrasted sharply with Traci's soft-spoken warmth. And yet beneath Sienna's sharp-edged beauty, there was something undeniably fragile, something that made people want to either protect her or run from her. Matt, predictably, had chosen to protect her. But for Sienna, the moment she heard Traci's name, something inside her tightened. She had heard stories about the Abbott family, but nothing had prepared her for the legend of Traci Abbott, a woman adored by the entire community, cherished by her family, and respected as the emotional backbone of Genoa City's most powerful dynasty. The first time Sienna saw Traci after Matt's return, she felt it immediately. The subtle shift in Matt's demeanor, the softening of his voice as he said Traci's name, the flicker in his eyes when Traci entered the room. It wasn't romantic, not in a possessive sense. But it was deep. It was meaningful. It was history. And that terrified Sienna more than anything else. She could compete with other women. She could outperform, outwit, or outshine them. But she couldn't compete with a past that had never truly ended. So when Matt insisted that Sienna accompany him to the Abbott mansion, she did so reluctantly, her heels clicking loudly against the polished floors, mirroring the beat of her unease. Traci was in the sitting room, holding a book she wasn't actually reading. When she looked up and saw Matt enter with Sienna at his side, the color drained from her cheeks. She recovered quickly, too quickly, but Sienna saw it. Sienna saw everything. And in that moment, the emotional dynamic among the three of them crystallized in the air like frost on glass. Traci, the woman with a past deeply intertwined with Matt's heart, Matt, torn between gratitude for Sienna's fiery companionship and an unresolved tenderness he was trying to ignore, and Sienna, caught between insecurity and defiance, determined not to lose the man she had come to love. Traci, Matt began, his voice softer than he intended, there's someone I'd like you to meet properly. Traci forced a warm smile, extending a hand to Sienna. I've heard so much about you. Welcome to Genoa City. But her voice betrayed her, trembling ever so slightly. Sienna noticed. Matt noticed. And that was the problem, everything about Traci's emotional transparency made Matt feel something Sienna couldn't access, a familiar ache, a nostalgia, a comfort. The kind of comfort people build marriages on, not flings. Sienna responded with her signature confidence, though jealousy simmered beneath every syllable. The pleasure is mine. Matt speaks very highly of you. There it was, the test. Would Matt deny it? Downplay it? Distance himself from Traci emotionally? Instead, he smiled softly, his eyes drifting toward Traci in a way that made Sienna's stomach twist. It's impossible not to, he said. A simple line, a casual truth. But it sliced through Sienna like a blade. The conversation that followed was polite but laced with subtext. Traci tried to remain grounded, but every moment felt like she was being forced to watch the man she once loved slip further out of reach. She saw the way Sienna touched Matt's arm, the way he leaned subtly toward her, the way their emotional rhythm flowed with a familiarity she hadn't anticipated. But Sienna, despite her confidence, felt threatened. Because she could see, clearly, that she wasn't just dealing with a woman from Matt's past. She was dealing with the woman who still had the power to shift the ground beneath him. As the meeting ended and Matt and Sienna prepared to leave, Traci summoned every ounce of grace in her body and smiled. You're welcome here anytime, she said. Matt hesitated. Sienna pulled him gently toward the door. And then it happened, something small, almost invisible, but devastating in impact. Matt looked back at Traci. Just once. Just for a second. But it was enough. Traci's breath caught. Sienna's heart clenched. And Matt, realizing he had revealed too much, quickly looked away. Later that night, Matt and Sienna argued, not explosively, but in the quiet, lethal way that reveals the deepest insecurities. You care about her, Sienna whispered, her voice cracking. Matt exhaled slowly. Of course I care. She was important to me. Was? Sienna pressed, her eyes filling with something between fear and anger. Or is? And Matt had no answer. Meanwhile, across town, Traci sat alone in her bedroom, staring at an old photograph of her younger self, a girl who once believed she could be loved without being abandoned or overlooked. She whispered a truth she had been avoiding ever since seeing Matt: I still love him. And in that whispered confession, the emotional landscape of Genoa City shifted. Lines were drawn. Hearts were exposed. Fault lines appeared beneath relationships built on fragile foundation. Because now, the question was no longer whether Traci and Matt had unfinished business, it was whether that unfinished business would destroy everything Matt had built with Sienna. And for the first time since her return, Traci Abbott, gentle, kind, forgiving Traci, found herself standing at the edge of a love triangle she never intended to re-enter. The fragile balance that once held Traci Abbott's heart together shattered the moment she confronted Matt again, this time without tears, without trembling, without the softness that had always defined her. Instead, she carried a storm inside her, one that had been building since the day she saw him in the Abbott living room, standing beside Sienna Bacall, looking at her not with longing, not with regret, but with something far more devastating: distance. Traci had spent her entire life being the emotional anchor of the Abbotts, the safe harbor, the peacekeeper, the gentle soul who absorbed everyone else's chaos while burying her own. But love, true love, the kind that is buried deep beneath years of silence, has a cruel way of turning gentleness into fury when it is reawakened only to be denied. And that fury finally broke through the surface the night she confronted Matt alone. The confrontation took place in the Abbott garden, under the dim glow of lanterns Jack had hung for an upcoming family dinner. In the cold evening air, Traci's breaths were sharp, uneven, charged with emotions she didn't recognize in herself. When Matt arrived, unsure, hesitant, already sensing danger, he barely had time to speak before Traci unleashed the pain she had been swallowing for years. You left me, she hissed, her voice trembling with rage instead of sorrow. You disappeared like I was nothing. And now you stand here with her, like the past meant nothing to you. Matt tried to speak, tried to offer the calm explanation of a man who believed kindness could mend everything, but the moment he said, Traci, please listen, she snapped. Her voice rose, raw and heartbreaking. Listen? For years I listened to my own silence because you weren't there. And then, she slapped him. A clean, echoing crack that cut through the garden like lightning. Matt froze, stunned, his hand drifting to the sting on his cheek. Traci's eyes widened, not in regret, but in a revelation of what she had become. You don't get to walk away again, she whispered, her voice suddenly cold. Not after running from everything we were. Everything you promised me. Matt stepped back, shaken. Traci, this isn't you. No, she said, her voice lowering to something darker. This is what you made me. And then she said the words that shifted the entire power dynamic between them: if you don't come back to me, if you walk away again, I will expose everything you did. Everything you think you hid. The moment the threat left her lips, Matt's expression changed, not to anger, not to guilt, but to fear. A fear so profound that Traci felt a jolt of triumph. He swallowed hard. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, but I do, she replied, stepping closer, her eyes burning with a dangerous clarity. Italy wasn't just tragedy. It wasn't just bad luck. There are things you did, choices you made, that could ruin you if the right people heard them. Matt's voice cracked. What are you saying? I know what you're capable of, Traci whispered. And I know what you did. Matt felt his stomach twist. Traci had always been honest, compassionate, the least manipulative person he had ever known. But now she was dangerous. Because she had the one thing he never believed she possessed: leverage. He took a deep breath, trying to regain control. Traci, if this is about your feelings, don't you dare reduce this to feelings, she snapped. You want to play the hero beside Sienna? Then I will show Genoa City the truth. The real Matt. The Matt who didn't just lose people, he helped destroy them. And that was when something inside Matt broke. A crack in his calm exterior, a flicker of panic in his eyes, a shadow that had been buried deep rising to the surface. Because Traci, whether intentionally or by instinct, had hit the one nerve that could turn fear into desperation. Matt had secrets. And secrets, in Genoa City, were deadly. He stared at her, truly stared, and for the first time Traci saw something she had never seen in his eyes before: danger. "You shouldn't have said that," Matt whispered. Traci took a small step back. "Why not?" His voice softened, almost eerily calm. "Because now you've given me no choice." She felt her pulse race. What do you mean?" Matt stepped forward, closing the distance between them, not with tenderness, but with predatory precision. "Traci, I don't want to hurt you," he murmured. "But if you expose me, if you threaten my life with Sienna," he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The air around them grew colder. Traci suddenly realized the gravity of her mistake. Pressing a man who had learned to hide fear behind charm, guilt behind silence, and darkness behind a gentle facade. Matt had spent years reinventing himself, burying his past, constructing the version of himself Sienna believed in. A version he couldn't risk losing, not to Traci, not to anyone. Traci tried to regain control, her voice trembling. "Matt. I didn't mean, yes," he said quietly. "You did." The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled too tightly. And then the thought appeared in Matt's mind, not fully formed, not planned, but emerging from the darkest corners of panic and fear. If Traci threatens his life, she becomes a threat he must eliminate. He didn't say it. He didn't have to. His eyes revealed everything. Traci's breath caught, her face paling as she finally understood the man standing before her was not the same Matt she once loved. Something inside him had shifted, snapped.